Welcome to the Clean Library Podcast, where content meets conscience. We believe there are millions of you readers out there desperately searching for a better way to find clean content. Each episode, we will introduce you to a new author of clean books, giving you, your family, and your friends clean options.
Hello, everyone. My name is Marcus Williams. I'm here with Brock Morris, and today our special guest is Tanya Harris Roundy, and we're so excited to have her today. Tanya is first and foremost a wife, mother, and grandmother, born and mostly raised in Utah with a few stints in California. She has a master's in education from Utah State University and a BS in English literature from Utah Valley University. She engages students in learning English, theater, and speech and debate. While directing plays is her addiction, which she calls therapy. She also loves to write, act, sing, play the piano, write songs, and be involved with her church and genealogy. Her faith sustains her through everything she does and prays to always be an influence for good in the world. So welcome, Tanya. Thank you for being with us here today.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you.
So we're going to start out, before we ask our first question, in your application, you put down 2 truths and a lie. So we are going to read those out to here, and then Brock and I will try to figure out if we can get it right, if we can figure out which one is the lie by the end of the interview. So be careful. Brock might try to trip you up a little bit while we're
That's
talking
right.
to get some clues here.
It's not hard to
So
do with me.
okay, so here they are. Number 1, I've been writing for over 30 years. Number 2, I've directed over 50 plus plays. And number 3, I love being around lots of people. So, writing for over 30 years, directed over 50 plus plays, or love being around lots of people. So, everyone listening, see if you can figure it out as well as we go along. Otherwise, we will jump into it and get started here with the questions. All right. So, first of all, why don't you just tell us about yourself and your journey to becoming an author?
That's a very long journey. So when I was very young, I learned how to read before I went to school. And so in kindergarten, my teachers would say, "She can't read, she can't read." And my mom would go, "She can read since she was 3." And come to find out, I was making up my own stories in kindergarten because I was bored. And so it's been a long journey of writing my own stories, apparently, according to my mother. But I've wrote a lot of short stories when I was in high school and stuff. A lot of creative things that my teachers would get me to do. Poetry was a big outlet for me, um, getting out my feelings and things like that as an angsty teenager. And it was about 20 years ago, 21 years ago, that um, I was working a graveyard shift at a hospital in a NICU, and I was bored. So the internet was a new thing, and I was out searching out writers' websites and things like that, and got in on a little writer's course, and they gave me a word called certainty. And I started just writing and doing. Life got in the way. Did never really finish that. It sat around, pick it up every once in a while over 20 years. And then a couple years ago, I had the privilege of attending a writers conference with Richard Paul Evans, and within the last 2 years was able to then work on getting it published through self-publishing, um, with editing and all those things in the process. And this last December, finally, 20 years later, got the book finished, and now I've got the next one on its way, and a series planned and ready to go through that. So
Awesome. So is the book you published last year the one that you started way back then?
yes, it literally just picked up that manuscript and finished it, did some editing and tweaking, which was kind of amazing that I didn't do more editing, and
Mhm.
tweaking that long, but a lot of it just was finishing it. I'd had it already in my head for that many years, but 6 kids, degrees, moving, teaching, directing, I mean, it was just it got put on the back and finally got it up and going, and there it is, so.
So you said there that you got it published, and now sort of you're already working on the second book, and you have a series plan and things like that. Was there something about the act of actually having it published that sort of opened the floodgates for you, or is that just that life now is in a place now that it's published that you can start working on the planning the rest of it?
Both. I mean, throughout the other years, I was writing plays with my students, writing plays for one acts and competition. I was writing poetry still and doing a lot of those things. Um, when you teach English, you do a lot of other writing as well.
Right.
But I think, yeah, a lot of it came down to that it was the right time and the right place. My kids are grown up now. I've gone through a lot of other life experiences, which now helped me to understand where I was going with that book in the first place that I didn't understand at the time. And the act of publishing it, I think, was a huge thing. Is like I can do this. It was an interesting process when I was going through editing because I edit with my students and I encourage them and I go through this, but I'd never really had that opportunity with me. No teachers had really taken that time with me to do that. And when I was going through the editing process, that editor did exactly that. I'm like, whoa, this is like really cool. And I found it very satisfying and felt more confident in who I was and as a writer to actually see that and hold it in my hands and go, okay, I can do this. And almost 50 years old and finally realizing that is kind of very cool.
Yeah, some validation to that, right? Yeah, that makes a ton of sense.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, is there a point that you made a conscious decision to keep the content of your book clean, or was that always the plan, or how did that work for you?
I've always been a very um, conservative person when it comes to those types of things. I was raised very conscientiously to with clean content in my home. I mean, my mother read me classics. We read Shakespeare, we read those things. I know, and a lot of people, there's a lot of things in those as well. But
Yeah.
my mother always taught us how to think about that and how to go, okay, we can take this out and still learn from these things. And so my mother was really good at teaching us how to do these things. When I was first doing theater, it's there's always things in theaters, plays and stuff. In my very first audition, when my a cold read, my um, theater teacher handed me a script, and he was waiting to see if I skipped the word, and and I did, and he's like he was kind of proud of me, and he gave me the role anyway and stuff, even though I'd skipped it, and so and most of my poetry and most of my things throughout the years was very religious based and based on my faith and my testimony in God and the gospel. And so when I started writing, I knew that was where I wanted to go with things. And you could talk about hard things. C.S. Lewis, Tolkien, um, they all were able to deal with very hard issues with war and grappling of serious things without having to take it in ways that could would put off their audience. And so I felt that, good writing's good writing, and you don't have to have that stuff in it to deal with it.
Mm.
So, one of the questions we get a lot, and the discussion that we've had, Brock and I have had a lot, is what is clean?
Right.
Especially, right. We put it in quotes because what does that mean? Is there a graduated scale? Is it a set definition? So, for you, when we say clean, what does that mean to you?
And I've grappled with this over the years too, because as a literary major, you in college you're given what you're reading, and you have to do, um, and it's hard because there's a lot of really great stories out there with a lot of great meanings and morals. 1984, Brave New World, all these things, but they've got stuff in them um,
Right.
that can be uncomfortable, and that a lot of people are like, "Whoa, wait a minute." And so I've had over the years, what most people see as clean as language is out, that there's no, sexual material, things like that in there. For me, sometimes it's other stuff that makes it, there's a lot of material that talks about things that I just am like, no, I'm not putting that on stage. I'm not writing about that. I'm not going to read those things. So it's been hard because there's a lot of things out there and I love Huckleberry Finn. That's like one of my favorite all-time novels. There's words in there that aren't kosher nowadays, and I've had to learn to teach my students stuff. Hey, sometimes there's words that had a different meaning then, and we have to, talk about them in that context and how they affect us. And just like in the scriptures, I mean, the Bible is not clean in a lot of
Good point.
ways.
Right.
One of my seminary teachers was like, if the Book of Mormon was made into a movie, it would be rated R, because of the content. If it was is done out, that it would be hard. But we also learned that without that opposition, we can't see things. And how do we balance maybe uncomfortable, hard things to talk about with keeping out things and not disengaging our audience? One of the first things my students always ask when I say you get to write your own story is, can we use language? Can we swear? I'm like, so we have a talk about, well, is it part of your character? Is it necessary? Is it absolutely crucial to the plot line? And most of the time, they cannot find a reason why it should be there. And so um, I have not yet found a reason to use it. Anytime I direct a play and I can get away with forgetting or lines and making words not be there, Shakespeare is easy because it's royalty free and I can cut a lot of things. I will do that as much as I can, not to sanitize, and I try very hard not to take away what's necessary for the message and the learning. But it's a balancing act when you're doing this. Personally, when I'm writing and doing, I'm never going to use language or intimacy or in any way that's going to make it a problem. Even when I direct shows like Into the Woods, it's like I can show these things without showing those things. It's people know
Right.
it's there. You can lead them in the right direction, leave it to their imagination and move forward. And but it's I don't know if there's one way because everyone's got different values, everyone's got different life experiences, um, and learning to respect and appreciate those. But there's lines definitely that I will not cross and don't go for. So
Yeah. So your first book took you 20 years, which is not uncommon. Okay, that
right,
happens a lot.
yeah.
My first book was over 10 years before I was finished with it. So do you think you have a process, or have you refined a process of writing and getting it to publishing, and what does that look like for you?
For the biggest thing for me is like not letting myself get stopped like I did the last time. Just letting the story happen. That I as a perfectionist and a someone who likes to see things well done as a writer in classes and papers, and I always wanted an A, and I always wanted these things. Just letting myself free to just write and make mistakes, taking that risk, which I do all the time as an actress on stage, but somehow in writing, I had put it in a different category. I
Hmm.
One of the biggest things I've learned from the workshops and the retreats and stuff over the last couple of years is just write, just get the story out, let it happen. And so that's what I'm doing with this second one is it's already written there. I'm just having to now get it out and not get caught up in editing myself every 5 minutes because
Yeah.
I'm like, "Nope, gotta fix nope, just let it get out." And I tell my students this all the time, like, "Just get the words on the page, you can always go back." But I'd never let myself do that, and so, that's the biggest thing I've learned over the couple of years is to give myself the same grace and advice that I gave my students, to do that. So I've got that. The biggest, part that you've talked about with self-publishing is just the funding. You're a teacher and money, and so,
Right.
also allowing myself to just pay for things and pieces and be patient, which is hard,
Right.
is to do. So now that I've got this one done and I'm out doing it and promoting it, I'm getting this other piece done. I'm planning this summer to, just like last summer, get in that publishing, editing, and do and try to just keep myself on a schedule of that each year or two. So
So would you say the cost is the biggest hurdle to self-publishing?
I think that, and I found that for the most people that I've talked to in the self-publishing world that I've been with, is the cost is when you have to pay for an editor, and even with discounted prices or finding people to get the quality that you want is pricey, which is worth their
Yeah.
time. I mean, they're valuable time and they're valuable skills. I know because I've done it, but it's still hard to save up when you don't have if you're not publishing enough to like keep that self-sustaining going, and you're
Right.
just getting started, it's definitely, I know there's a couple of local authors we have here in Payson around us that they've got their book all written. They've already got it ready, but the hurdle is finding the funds to hit to those next steps and do. And so,
Right.
yep.
So, as a clean author, do you find that a hurdle to marketing, to getting your book seen, or do you see it as a plus, as a positive, negative, or
I think it's a little bit of both. I think that a lot of people are looking for it. A lot of people are hoping to find something. They don't, they like me, or like, man, if they just didn't have this little bit, or okay, skip those couple of chapters and move on, and or we never pick up the book again, or we walk away from a performance or something. A lot of people are looking for content out there. We see that with VidAngel and Angel Studios, that there's a need for it. But at the same time, there's also people who are like, man, this isn't edgy enough, or it's not real, it's not authentic. Um, my students are like, whenever I cut something out, well, Mrs. Roundy, that's not what it's like. And I'm like, but does it have to be? You know, just because I'm writing about teenagers doesn't mean I have to use all the language that they're using in the hallways to be authentic to their life. Otherwise, my books would be rated X, and from all the things I see and hear every day in a junior high, it's sad but true. So there's some ways in which making it authentic, making it honest for people in a way, but at the same time, like I said, you can deal with hard issues without having to do it. And mine is also, religiously based, so that niches my audience even more, to what they're willing. And if I was to put language in it, it would definitely turn them off. If I was to put things in it, which my next book is going to deal with some things, because the character is going through his crisis, and he's drinking, he's smoking. But can I leave other things out? Absolutely. Can I make it understood? Absolutely. It's just making it so that my audience can understand and not be turned off by it. That's, I think, doable. Just, it may be hard for some people. Like, this isn't real. This is my son will be like, but mom, that's not how I talk. And I'm like, that's okay. I don't want to include how you talk, because you have to edit yourself and still have a hard time around me. So, yeah.
well, that's an interesting point when you talk about, well, that's not what real life. Why is real life not? And is that true for everyone, or is that what we think real life is because that's what media tells us it is? Like, it's not my real life, so you know,
And that's my thing, is a lot of times what media has done is now created what real life is. Like, all the things that I saw happening in Disney 15, 20 years ago that I wouldn't let my children watch is now what my kids are think is reality. And so they're making it reality. And so the way that they act in school, the way that they talk in school, the way that they behave has now become the reality over the last 5, 10 years, because that's what they saw, and nobody bothered to tell them otherwise or whatnot. So it has, unfortunately, I think, become the reality for so many. And those who do not want to, like, I know so many kids who don't want to be around that, but they have to walk to class. They
yeah,
have to walk through all of this stuff, and things that you and I, because I know we graduated the same year. Sorry, I don't know about your Brock, but I know that he and I did. Um, I know we never had to, even in California. I never saw or heard things like this in a California high school, what I see and hear now.
yeah. And if they have to be exposed to it at school and they have no choice, do they need to be exposed to it in the choices they make in the books they read and
And I
the
hope not.
shows they watch?
Right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, we
So,
know life is not clean. And so if there's one area that you can reach out and select something that doesn't contain those graphic type of imagery or language or whatever the case might be, I think there's those who are seeking that when they have to walk through and trudge through
It's
the
almost a relief.
uncleanliness of
It's an
life. Yeah,
escape. It's
exactly.
safe for them. And just like escapism used to be in books for escaping life in other ways, now that can become an escape as well, to find those pieces. And like I say, there's so much out there. They don't want to read classics anymore, but there's so many things that used to be written that way. I mean, we used to teach children how to read using the Bible. We used to teach children how to read using Shakespeare and all of these pieces of work that didn't have any of this stuff in it. And now in our classrooms are like, well, we need contemporary works that the kids are used to, but there's nothing meaningful in them. And there's so much stuff you can't even choose because it's like, what one do we choose out of all of these things? It's not going to have something in it because even your young adult authors now are putting things in that you're just like, I wouldn't even read that as an adult. So,
Yeah. So, how do you personally, when you're choosing books to read, how do you find out like what kind of content it has before you like how do you choose?
oh, wow. Uh, that's been hard because I've chosen a few things that I thought would be like really great. And then I get halfway through and I'm like, and I like the concept. I love the ideas, the pretext for it, because I'll read the back of the book like you used to be able to get through, right? And you feel
Hmm.
like, oh, yeah, I can read this. Um, so a lot of times it's word of mouth. I'm reading reviews, which can be up and down. Or sometimes I just go back to reading my classics. A lot I just like I know those are safe. I know those stories are good. Sometimes my kids are reading a lot of things in my classrooms and I'll get reviews from them and I'll have them rate things so that I'm like, okay, this kid said that's safe. I trust them. So I'm like I'm taking kids reviews of things they're reading. Um and I try to know about the books even if I'm not reading them just so I can talk with kids about them. So I'm trying
Hmm.
to find out things. It's just there's so many books being written now and so many things. It's hard to keep up even on what's available. So sometimes I just go back to let me read Narnia. And let me pull out my book, my books from 20, 30 years ago and hit my Iliad and my Odyssey and uh, go
Yeah.
back to what I know.
Well, and if you look at like one of the most popular genres is romance, right? But if you
Right?
look at the greatest romance book of probably all time that is still popular today would be Jane Austen's books, and yet those there's nothing
Yeah.
in those that you could
Because
consider
the time
unclean.
period wouldn't allow for it. I mean, the most
Right,
scandalous thing is they talk to each other alone with their chaperone 5 feet behind them.
right. Which obviously doesn't work in today's world, but it's it's it. I think the fact that it's still popular and still beloved is proof
Well, the
that you
fan
don't need.
fiction that's coming out from those, I mean, everyone's rewriting versions of them. Hallmark movies, there's a whole channel dedicated to, knockoffs and versions of her books. Like Shakespeare is still the basis for so many romances and tragedies and comedies. It tells you that there's something there, and why do we need to resort to those things? Yeah.
Yeah. So is there something that you wish either someone had told you or that if you were your present self could tell your past self about your
Uh,
author journey?
I have a hard time. That question is because I wouldn't be who I was or I am today if I hadn't gone through those. I wouldn't know it to tell myself or to understand. And sometimes you have to go through those to really get there. But I think the biggest thing that I always think is trusting myself, trusting yourself to take risks and to let yourself try new things, which is so hard to do. But just trusting myself to do things, which is a teenager, you don't even know yourself to trust yourself.
Right.
But if there's one thing I could do, it would be trust myself more, back in those days and to continue doing that. It's a lifelong process, I think.
Yeah.
I love I love that concept. And you'd mentioned earlier how sort of your work as an actor had helped you from an authoring standpoint not let sort of perfect get in the way of good, right? Is Are there other experiences that you had either in writing scripts or acting or even life in general that you see has helped on that journey also as you've delved into to writing and authoring more?
I think the biggest thing that acting and directing and writing things is allowed me to see the different perspectives, and helping me to see other points of view and thoughts and feelings and to give respect to those. And then that comes to my book. It's like when I'm writing my books, I'm like, okay, how would I see this? What would I need on stage to understand this? Who am I? Where am I? What do I want? How much do I want it? What's in my way? All of those things that I take when I take a character, how do I make sure that that is also coming alive and creating an authentic, real person in my books so that my audience can see and feel that character coming through. So a lot of it's informed either on that for sure. The other thing I think is that redos. It's when well, Marcus knows this too. On stage, it's a live audience every time, and it changes every time. And when you read a play or you will see a play, or years later, it might mean something different. Which was something with my books I didn't want to is I don't want to give so much that it can't breathe, and so much that it can't live on afterwards and be real for other people in the future as well. So trying to keep it not so specific and so type into one moment that it can't be authentic and real for others as we move forward in life.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Not being an author myself, I don't know that I'd ever considered how much something like acting or directing, the whole process of putting yourself in a different character, right? How much that would lend itself in authoring a book, right? And writing the characters in your book, and having to live in their head a little bit as you try to structure that. That's fascinating.
It also helps with the dialogue because a lot of times dialogue in books seems so forced and it's like, that's not natural, that's weird, right?
Mhm.
But having to be on stage and make an honest conversation feel and be natural and not come across that way has really helped me in my books to say, okay, how would this conversation actually take place, and what would that actually look like and sound like, and not feel like I'm in this other place and out of reality. So
And I think all of that goes back to your comment of trusting yourself. Like you have the experience, you have all of these skills that help you be a better author, and you have to trust those when you're writing.
right, yeah. Which, as a director, I don't know if you've directed much, Marcus, but when you get
Mhm.
out there and you're directing, you're just like, okay, I hope it works. Um,
Yeah.
well, and the care and you're not. That is one great thing. The characters in my book, although sometimes they do tell me what to do in my head, uh, I'm like, I can control those, whereas on stage, I cannot always control what happens with those
Right.
people.
But it's a cool feeling when you as a director
Yeah,
describe what you want out of the
and then it
character,
happens.
and then it happens and they understand and they bring it to life. That's
And
an
it
amazing
happens the
feeling.
same way in a book when all of a sudden the character that you wrote, I had one of my readers go, "Oh my goodness, I saw this, this, and this," and then I went right back and read in this, and I went, "Oh, you got it. Okay, it wasn't just me thinking really cool things might happen, and no one will ever understand it." When a reader comes back and says the same thing, you're like, "Whew," but you don't always get that immediate response as you do when you're
Mhm.
directing, because yeah, and so that's been a hard thing too. Is like, do they get it? I don't know. So
Yeah, I had, I have a Christmas book and there's a twist to it, so there's some little clues, and I got a couple reviews where people thought the clues were mistakes. I'm like, "No." And so then I went back and said, "Was it my fault? Like, did I not set it up well enough, or did I not describe it well enough?" Or so I went and asked other people who've read it, and they're like, "No, I got it. I understood." Okay. It's just what's not me.
but they don't always tell you, and you don't get the clapping, you don't get the laughter, you don't get the
Right.
gasping moments. So yeah, that's been a different world as well because the acting and directing world or the teaching world where I get to see that immediate feedback is definitely not happening in the authorship world, and trusting yourself that it's well, they're not saying anything bad. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. So give us the blurb of your book. Tell us about it.
So two children die in a fire on Christmas Day, and the family learns, who have not had really a lot of faith beforehand, through the kindness and faith of others, learn to understand about faith in the next life and that families can be together forever.
And what's the title?
Certainty, Walking Through Fire.
All right. So do you have a website, or
We have
where
a
can people
website,
find you?
Tanya, I think it's Tanya Harris Roundy. It's a Google site, so it is very long.
Okay.
But but if you search it, it's out there. So
Okay. All right. Cool. So we'll search that and we'll post that for people. Do you have other clean authors that you like that you would like to recommend to our listeners?
so Mary Flint is a amazing author. She's writing sci-fi fantasy. She's out of Texas. She's got a third book she's working on, two books in the series. Clean, exciting, innovative, whole new languages. It's kind of like reading a lot of Tolkien over again, getting those languages in there and stuff. It's been very fun with her work. She's young, up and coming. Debbie Rasmussen writes some mystical, spiritual, horror kind of stuff. Series of books this long, and then she's got some shorter versions that she's doing as well. Excellent in there. Um, can't think of it. Colton Clausen. Colton Clausen, a Utah author. He started writing when he was in high school, got
Hmm.
published right after, and he's got a series of mystery novels with detectives, things along your lines, Marcus. He's in his late 20s now, and just keeps going and doing, and some really great work that's happening. Wendy Houghton just did a novel about her raising her son with autism, which has been a beautiful story. And those are a few of my favorite ones recently that I've been picking up and doing.
Awesome.
That's great.
That's awesome. Thank you for those recommendations.
Yeah.
So is there anything else you would want our listeners and or your readers to know about you?
Um, that I just love to help out with people and do, and I hope that they understand my testimony and my faith as they read my works, and that they can come to know for themselves that life has more to offer, and if we remember the good times, they can overweigh the bad. So
Excellent. Well,
Awesome.
thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. I learned a lot. That was a great conversation. I love these conversations because I learned so much, and I find
they're
out
great.
So great.
your journey. And
And now we have to try to
I can
figure
see
out
a
if
kid.
we
Has
can
Brock figured
pinpoint.
out anything here?
yeah,
Well, so I've
exactly.
been I've been sort of delving in the background here, and I'll give what I believe is the lie. At least it's going to be a guess. So as I've listened to you talk, and I start thinking about what it means to be a director and what it means to be an actor, I feel like being around a lot of people wouldn't be an issue, right? So because when that was mentioned, I thought, okay, maybe that's it. So I'm going to say it's the number of scripts that you've actually written. So because you said 50, right?
50 that I directed,
Directed.
yeah. Mhm.
Or direct that you I'm sorry, that you've directed. So I'm going to say it's less than 50 as a director is or I'm going to say the 50 as a director is the lie. So
Okay, so to be contrary, I'm going to go with the I love being around lots of people as the lie.
Marcus would be correct.
yeah,
Yes, 2 weeks in a row.
You would
it
think.
was either way. I would it could be either way, right? You can be around a lot of people while you act and then not want to be around them, right? I mean, it kind of puts you out of your comfort zone. I'll let you answer that, but
I have social anxiety. I do. It's a funny thing, which is ironic considering that I'm an actor and I'm a speech and debate person and all these things. I actually got into those things in high school because I have extreme stage fright, still do. Um, and so ironically, I have a whole character that I've created as a teacher so that I can function in a classroom. I've created my other characters to get through different things in life, and they've just become parts of me and stuff like that over the
Mhm.
years. But yeah, being around people is not my thing. I'd rather just sit at home and read a good book.
how inspiring is that you've intentionally chosen things that put you out of your comfort zone, that challenge you as a person, that help you to grow? I think that's such a great example. So thank you for sharing that. I think
Of
that's a
course,
powerful way to live life.
That's awesome.
we try.
And I'm up to nothing, just saying.
I heard that. All right.
All right. Well, thank you everybody so much for listening to this episode of the Clean Library Podcast. Please subscribe, follow, and check out more amazing authors as we continue this journey. Thanks for listening.